We're back now from AsiaBSDCon. A little tired, but none worse for the wear. This week, we're going to be chatting with Gleb Kurtsou about some file system level encryption utility called P.E.F.S. After that, we're going to be giving you a step-by-step guide on how to actually use it. And as usual, there's going to be a round of questions, and we've got a lot of news to catch up on, of course, with our recap of AsiaBSDCon. So go ahead and stay tuned to BSD Now, your place to be. SD. BSD Now, episode 29, recorded March 19th, 2014. Hey, I'm your host, Chris Moore.
And I'm Alan Jude.
And we're glad to be back with you guys this week. We're a little bit jet-lagged, a little bit tired, but we did make it back safe and sound from Tokyo and had a blast out there. So I'll give you my thoughts in a second. But Alan, what did you think of the conference this year?
Oh, it was great, as usual. You know, I was there a lot longer this time. Last year, I arrived like Friday night, did the conference Saturday and Sunday, spent Monday doing tourist things, and then went home Tuesday.
Sure.
This year, I arrived on the Tuesday before the conference. The plan was to have the Wednesday off, but then some people quickly organized a little Beehive conference. So I went to that on Wednesday. That was great. I even gave a little talk there, even though... on Tuesday when I went to bed, I did not know I was giving a talk there. So Wednesday morning, I had breakfast, checked my email. It's like, oh, I'm giving a talk. I better write some slides.
That's right. Like
so
the impromptu talk.
Yep. So I wrote those and then met up with Drew and Jim downstairs, and we managed to find our way to the venue using the Tokyo subway system, which is amazing.
Right.
I have a much better appreciation for it this year because I had to navigate by myself a few times. Last year, I mostly just followed other people around.
Sure.
And, you know, the only time I had to navigate by myself was like going one stop to get to
the conference itself.
Well, no, to get to the Tokyo station to get home. Getting home was the only part I had to do by myself. Every morning getting to the conference, you just meet a bunch of people downstairs and we all walked.
Sure.
But yeah. That was great. The BeehiveCon was great, and they already have the PDFs and videos up on their website. You know, the host, Takuya, gave a introduction to Beehive. There's his slides and the YouTube video. Then Peter Green, one of the key developers behind Beehive, gave Beehive past, present, and future, talking about what they've done, where they are now, and what they're working on. EUFI is almost here. It'll have a CSM module to boot FreeBSD until FreeBSD can boot EUFI by itself. I'm suppose having Beehive support EUFI might make it easier to test and actually get FreeBSD to boot EUFI.
Definitely.
Since you can, you know, boot it in EUFI but attach it to a debugger while you're doing it.
That's right. You won't have to grab a third-party util to test it now.
Yep. And then... Michael Dexter gave one about provisioning and monitoring Beehive, and then I gave one called depenguinating your infrastructure, how to get rid of all of your Linux servers and wrap them up in Beehive. And then there was Takuya gave another presentation about OSV on Beehive. So OSV is this idea of a hypervisor where you don't run an operating system, you just run one app in the hypervisor.
Oh, that's neat.
So the general idea is... you know, the operating system is just like the one thing, and then you load your application as a kernel module. So you compile your app, instead of compiling your app as a binary, you compile it as a shared library, and then you just suck it into the kernel. So the kernel is basically a wrapper and your app. And that's it.
Well, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. And then he also gave one about Ruby-Virtual Machine, where he used the Beehive libvm API or VMM API to build a virtual machine in Ruby.
Nice.
Right, so it calls the API, creates a virtual machine, then injects this chunk of assembly code as the operating system, which just takes two arguments, a character and a number, and it prints that character that number of times. because, you know,
Sure.
that takes this many lines of assembly. And and then, you know, it's got a while loop that does the hypervisor bit. So it's a replacement for the bhyve utility itself, the one that just launches the virtual machine, you know. So you just say this much RAM, this, you know, this many CPUs, and then run this assembly code. So that was pretty interesting. And Peter Graham was quite excited about that. He says, you know, for some regression testing and automated tests and stuff, that could be really useful. Currently, they compile a bastardized version of the FreeBSD kernel to inject a bunch of assembly code just to make sure that bhyve works, and this would be a lot easier to maintain and modify and automate. And then there were also 2 other talks, one about Kubos OS, which is a really secure, security-oriented flavor of Zen and something to run inside it. That was pretty interesting. It didn't really have much to do with bhyve, but it was related. And the idea was that, you know, is there anything they're doing that might make sense for bhyve to do to add security? And then Mo Klaudos was how to build an entire hypervisor system in 14 man days.
Wow.
Yeah.
Dang.
So it was like, you know, one of the interesting things about bhyve is how quickly it's come together. You know, it was just mostly, you know, it's a couple more people now, but when it started, it was mostly just 2 guys. And, you know, the idea was depend on as much stuff of the hardware virtualization as you can to avoid writing as much code as you can. And, you know, even now, bhyve is a remarkably small number of lines of code.
Sure.
And so that was also interesting.
Well, that's cool. That's cool. So that's like a cool wrap up of the bhyve conference. So
yeah, and
I
then
guess
on
I,
Thursday.
Oh, good. Yeah, I say now, just the first day.
Yeah.
Well, I was gonna say I arrived Monday. I didn't go to the bhyve conference. Did the tourist stuff. This was my 6th time, I want to say, going to AsiaBSDCon, and by far this was the biggest AsiaBSDCon as far as numbers of people there that I've ever seen.
Apparently there was one bigger one in the past when some Japanese celebrity was there.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Well,
I'm not sure if I was there for that one.
No, I think that was quite a few years ago.
Okay. Yeah, but this one was, what do you say? It was 150-ish people.
Yeah, 150
plus
people.
X number of speakers.
Plus, well, it was 150 people, including the speakers, but not including the people from the vendors that sat at the tables.
So yeah, it was really cool. I mean, it was big enough they had to move us to a special section of the restaurant where they could accommodate more folks for the reception dinner, and that was just a blast, a lot of fun. Conference-wise, a lot of great talks given this year, fascinating keynotes. Really enjoyed Matt Aaron's talk on OpenZFS and some of the new goodies and features that are being worked on currently.
And that, stay tuned for BSD Now. Watch our MP3 feed because at the Developer Summit on Friday, which I don't think you made it to that, did you?
No. Well, I was there
Friday
for part
morning
on Thursday, or Friday morning, whatever
Friday
it was.
morning was when Matt gave his talk on ZFS, and I set up my little Zoom recorder and barraged him with questions as he talked, and I have about 100 minutes of Matt Aaron's in a can of like amazing ZFS details, almost exclusively just about what's he's been working on for the last 6 months, which is stuff that'll be going into FreeBSD in the next couple of months, and what their plans are for the next 6 months.
That's really cool.
Yeah,
yes, that's like a bonus episode in and of itself.
Yes, we'll probably record headers and footers and wrap that up and do an audio episode as a bonus, and offer that to everyone because it's such good information.
Yeah, that's. I mean, anytime he speaks, there's just lots of cool info. And ZFS, I mean, shoot, a lot of the talks all just
you can never learn too much about that, right?
So.
Well, yeah, that was the other thing. Is that I think 4 of the talks were almost exclusively about ZFS.
Just rename it AsiaBSDCon and be done with it.
Yeah.
But no, that's a good thing. I mean, there was a lot of good ZFS stuff there.
Lots of good embedded stuff.
Just a variety of talks. I'd say it was about the same ratio, 50-50 Western developers and then Asian developers who were there. And great conference. I can't praise it enough. Really enjoyed it this year, and a great job to Hiroki and the other AsiaBSDCon organizers for putting this on.
Committee members and so on.
Definitely. So, what was any other favorites or particular things that you
I don't know,
enjoyed?
just getting to go out to lunch. The one day it was like Matt Aarons, myself, Martin Matuska, who's one of the guys that ported ZFS and maintains ZFS and FreeBSD, and Brooks Davis, and we just went and had real bento boxes that actually came in like a wooden box, not a cardboard one.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and I don't know, this crazy stuff, and Hackers Lounge, or during the Dev Summit, just debugging problems with wireless with Sean Bruno.
It's always fun when you get there and find out your Wi-Fi doesn't work because they're running a web in this case.
Yeah, it was like, if any one person ran into this, they would think, hey, that's just some problem. It's like, oh, it's my Wi-Fi that's the problem, or it's my setup, or I've done something wrong, or anything like that. When there are like 6 developers in a room and all of their ThinkPads refuse to associate, it's like,
Wait a minute here.
Yeah, and we dig into the code, and I add some debugging, and it's like, oh, I see. It's this AP is showing up as disabled in WPA supplicant. Why is that? And then I dig some more, and I'm like, in the function that returns whether it's enabled or disabled, it's returning disabled because it's saying that it doesn't support WEP. I'm like, why would it say it doesn't support WEP?
Yeah, sigh.
Yeah. I wrote a little patch that fixed it, and then Sean tried to write a better patch, but then that didn't fix it, and then
I think there's some more development on the list.
Yeah, Rui wrote a proper patch, and I think there's a PR, and it should get fixed in a day or two, if it's not already. Have to give people time to get home and get their brain back up to speed in order to finish. So
Alan and I are both a little jet lagged still.
Yeah.
So.
The show started a little late today because I was sleeping until I got a text message to be like, hey, you're doing a show. I'm like, oh, right.
yeah, that's today. Where am I? I don't know what's going on.
Exactly.
But no, it's good. I'm sure we'll be talking off and on about AsiaBSDCon interspersed throughout the next couple of weeks, especially once our brains clear a little bit.
Oh, yeah, and we got 4 interviews while we were there, so you guys have that to look forward to.
We did. So let's see. Who'd we get again?
John Hickson, and then Drew.
David Chisnell.
David Chisnell, Drew Levine, and Jim Brown.
Okay, yeah.
And plus we organized a couple other people. We'll get Julio Marino and someone else emailed us, and I can't remember his name off the top of my head right now. It was like, he was too busy watching other talks to take time out to be interviewed.
Sure.
And, we barely managed to find enough time to interview as many people as we wanted because there was so many talks that we wanted to see.
There was just a lot of stuff to do while you're there. And even if you weren't in the talks, just out in the hallway, there was so many people wanting to talk.
And that's the whole point. You don't want to miss out on any of it. And
Yeah. So, it was a good experience. Again, if in future years, if any of you guys listening could get out to one of these, I know we got BSDCan coming up in a couple months, so that would be your next opportunity for a BSD conference. Please do try and do so. I mean, it's a great conference. The experience and just the information you get at something like this just can't be duplicated elsewhere. It's definitely cool, like a whole 3 days of just BSD stuff, which is pretty awesome.
Yep. Yes, and also thank you to, I know there were at least 2 or 3 people that came out to AsiaBSDCon just because we told them to.
Yeah, there was a couple that came up to me and said exactly that.
Yeah, it was nice to get to hang out with people like John Knox and don't remember the other guy's name, sorry. I'm horrible with names. It's not your fault. But there was a couple of them, and I got to sit with them at dinner, and it was great.
Yeah, it was very cool. Awesome.
And,
well, I suppose
so,
we should get,
I sat across from Matt Aarons beside a bunch of people that came just because I, told them about it and stuff. So it was quite the experience, and we got to, and I guess who was there? Was Sean Bruno and Scott Long was there, and the 2 other Netflix guys were beside me, and I was just surrounded by awesome.
That is really. Was that at the banquet dinner?
Yeah, at the banquet, and then
see, I thought you didn't make it because I didn't see you all.
No,
I was like, oh, you're in another room.
Yeah, the one room was full by the time we got up the elevator and stuff. So we sat at the beginning of the next section, and there was like Rake and a bunch of people, and we had just enough Japanese people interspersed in our group that they could read the menu and order orange juice for me. And
there you go. Yeah, the menus there are pretty cool. They got little tablets at the restaurant, right?
Yeah.
And you order your drinks on that, and then they just bring it out. But if you can't read the Japanese, it doesn't do you
less
much good.
useful, yes.
Yeah.
Because,
yeah.
you know, at the sushi place here, the tablet that you order from has big pictures.
Yes, yes. Pictures are always appreciated, but they
Yes.
didn't happen in this case.
There we go. So there's the
Okay.
BeehiveCon website, which
There you
has
go.
the PDFs and the YouTube videos of all the talks from that. And then the AsiaBSDCon site should have the PDFs from all of that stuff, probably in a couple weeks or whatever. And then, yes, top story. Using Open SSH Certificate Authentication.
Ooh, cool. So I guess SSH has a not so often talked about authentication option. In addition to passwords and keys, you can use certificates to do any in addition to any current authentication method you're using. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was added in 2010, but, you know, most people haven't thought about different ways to authenticate with SSH since, like, early 2000, right? You learned about keys and then you were done.
Yeah, and that was it.
Yeah.
So I guess it's not really all that complex is what it says here. It's just, and there isn't a lot of documentation out there on how to use them. So this post is trying to fix a little bit of that, kind of give you a walkthrough on how to set up certificate authentication. But there is a big benefit not needing a known host files or authorized users file anymore. So that's kind of cool that you can do away with those if you go the cert route. So the post there, if you hit the link up after the show, you'll see a lot of detail about the differences, advantages, and implications of using a cert versus, say, a key or password for authentication.
Yeah, one of the big differences is if you're using certificates from a CA you trust, whether that's one you run yourself or one your company runs or a regular internet CA, the first time you connect to an SSH server, you get that warning unless you're using like SSHFP and DNS. About how this key, is this the right one or whatever. Well, if you're using certificates, then you can check, do I trust the certificate authority that signed the certificate? If yes, then you don't get that warning because you know it's a trusted server because it has a key signed by the certificate authority that you already trust. So that's useful. And then you can also, have, instead of having a key in an authorized keys file, you have a key signed by certificate authority that the host can tell whether they trust that certificate authority, and so on.
And if so, then just let me in. There you go.
And the main advantage is the revocation of keys and certs. Instead of having to try to just put, at revoked in front of a user's known host file, et cetera, then you can just revoke it at the certificate authority, and then it's no longer trusted. It allows you centrally to revoke somebody's certificate. So,
pretty slick.
If it's a business, say, and you have employee churn, then, being able to revoke in one place and know that every server is going to stop trusting that user and that there isn't going to be one that you forgot to go and comment out is SSH key or whatever is probably going to give you a much bigger peace of mind.
Yeah, that sounds very handy to have. Oh, that's cool. Well, again, hit up that link after the show if you'd like to take a look at how to do that. Maybe that's something that'll work better in your organization.
Maybe at some point we'll look at actually doing this as a tutorial.
Yeah, I agree.
It looks really cool.
Should be done as well. Okay, next up we have a Back to FreeBSD, a new series. So similar to the FreeBSD Challenge blog series that we've mentioned in the past, one of our listeners has started a new series writing about his journey switching back to FreeBSD. So pull quote from this. A long time ago, I had a box which was running FreeBSD 4 on a Pentium. Nice. 14 years later, he's decided to get back into FreeBSD, and now at FreeBSD 10. So it says right here he's starting off with PC-BSD since it's easy to get working with the dual graphics. So very cool.
Yeah.
And it looks like this will be a fun new series to follow. See what his experience is like.
Yeah, because I think it'll be interesting to see how so much stuff hasn't changed because it just works. You have your rc.conf and most of the variables are the same, and I guess the package system changed, but just recently. If he had started earlier, he would still be used to the old one that wasn't so great. But the new one will just blow his pants off. But how much better it is and how little it's changed at the same time.
Yep. Well, I hope he has a good experience with it, and we'll be interested in following this. So hopefully we'll have some updates.
And yes, starting with PC-BSD, he will be amazed at how much easier it is.
Yeah. This isn't your old system install anymore, and then trying to figure out how to get X working and all this and that. Well, good. Well, I hope
And
he has a good
apparently he
experience.
likes i3, and he was glad that PC-BSD would let him choose that.
Oh, yes. That's right. Yeah, I've not actually personally used i3, but more power to you. If you like some of those smaller window managers, not my thing. I still prefer full.
That's one of the other things about PC-BSD is that even though you've never used i3, it still works. Right? It's not like only the ones you bother to test actually work. All of them just
No. We've included it, and somebody's tested them. We've had either Drew or myself or other developer Ken or Josh. Several of our guys go through and check all these and make sure that they start and at least work and all that. I don't guarantee you'll like them. Maybe if it's not a window manager for you, but at least we've ensured that they work out of box.
Nicely done.
Yep. Cool. Okay. Well, next up, what do we have about OpenBSD?
It'd be interesting to see his thoughts.
Oh,
but yes.
So we'll be following that for you.
OpenBSD did recent experiments in package building. So Mark Espy, who's one of the guys in charge of package building over there, I think we're going to manage to get an interview with him at some point. He reports that tests running the OpenBSD distributed ports builder on a larger, unusual hardware, and some improvements that have come up from that. Yandex, which is I guess the biggest search engine in Russia, right? They're kind of like the Google of Russia. They've been around for a long time, but they've been getting even bigger lately. And the people at Yandex have donated some big machines to OpenBSD. And actually, one of the talks of the Dev Summit was that they also donated all the infrastructure for a mirror of FreeBSD in Russia, which is that was an interesting talk by Sean Bruno about what that takes, and it shows the network diagram of how they take 5 machines and turn it into a mirror cluster. So they have and the other. Well, anyway, we'll get to that in a minute.
Using carp on all that and fail over.
But I don't want to talk about that in the middle of the OpenBSD.
Yes.
Anyway, so they got a big machine from Yandex, and they were playing with it for package building because they've never used a machine that big before. The first remark says it doesn't really scale all that well with a lot of CPUs. It's probably faster to build using a cluster with 5 to 8 machines of 4 cores each than 3 machines with 16 cores each. So they had to look at what they could do to change that. And they also found that if you disable hyperthreading, you get about 20% more performance because you're not stealing CPU from yourself. I wonder if the guys that run Poudriere on the big machines at FreeBSD have played with that at all.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see if we see the similar numbers.
Yes. And he says having more memory helps. They found that once they went over about 20 gigabytes of RAM per box, everything got easier. And with 50 gigabytes per box, they could basically build all the ports in memory, which means getting rid of having to deal with the disk.
Oh, I can attest to that.
Yes.
Yeah, more RAM, the better when you're doing monster package builds.
Yeah, especially, I guess, originally they were doing everything over like NFS.
Ouch.
So, building them in RAM and copying them to NFS is so much faster. He says, computing dependencies while building packages. I have a set of packages that enable global depends cache that seems to shave an extra minute or so per package on calculating dependencies and stuff. And he said that's already gone in. And
that's
but
cool.
Yeah, lots of interesting experiments in what differences they found in using a smaller number of bigger machines instead of a large number of smaller machines. Because that's one of the things that led to Poudriere is they found that running it on a single machine with 24 cores was actually faster than the way they were trying to distribute the load across 8 machines.
Sure.
Because it avoids some duplication of work they had, and it just they got better performance by doing it all on one machine.
Yeah, and as the number of cores keeps going up, I think that's just going to get easier as time goes on.
I suppose the issue that they would have on OpenBSD is they can't quite do the same little trick that they do on FreeBSD of creating 16 or n jails, where n is the number of CPUs you have, to keep the concurrent builds from interfering with each other.
Well, and then also the ZFS integration. If you can do it in temp.fs, it don't matter.
Exactly. Because they use ZFS so that they can clone a data set and have a fresh jail with 0 setup time instead of having to create a CH root or whatever and then copy all the files into it.
Yeah,
and then
extract everything out again.
Yep.
So I guess their utility is called DPB,
Yeah.
and we'll be possibly showing a tutorial on that in the next few weeks. So that'd be kind of
yes.
cool.
As a side note, TJ decided that you guys shouldn't have to wait for our tutorials. So all the tutorials for the next month, all the ones we already had written, are now on the website, even though we haven't actually shown them on the show yet.
Okay.
So that also gives you the chance to try them and find any problems with them and tell us before I try to do it live on the show.
Consider it a way for us to beta test the tutorials before we do them here. That's really cool. Good idea. Thanks, TJ.
But anyway, if you want to look over this article on undeadly.org and see more about what speed ups and slowdowns they experience and how they change things around, and it's found that with all the changes they made, the time to do half of a full bulk run went from 21 hours to 14 hours. I guess they do a lot more architectures, but I don't think they were actually cross-building anything. So I wonder a little bit about that, because the FreeBSD guys had their build of all 24,000 FreeBSD packages for one architecture down to about 14 hours on a single machine.
Nice. Yeah. I remember the days it used to take a week.
Exactly.
To do all that.
It's like using a whole bunch of computers, it would take a week. Or we got this one computer that it's not like they're not even, I don't even think they're using that new mega machine with the terabyte of RAM and 80 CPUs. Because I don't think it would work. I think it would break.
The one I'm using 16 core, and I can do the whole ports tree in about 30-ish hours, I'll say.
And you're compiling it much more complicated, right? Because you're building X into everything that you can, and so
yeah, I got a lot more options turned on, so a lot of extra things are built in.
Yeah.
But cool. Okay, next up we have securing FreeBSD with two-factor authentication. So this is kind of a follow-up from last week.
Yep.
The article we had about that, but this is cool. As a matter of fact, I just opened this up. Let me hit bookmark. I will be messing with this here shortly, but yeah. So maybe you've set up two-factor authentication on your Gmail or Twitter, but have you done it on your BSD box? So we got a cool post that'll walk you through the process of locking down an SSH server with two-factor authentication. How slick is that? So with a mobile phone and a few extra tools, you can pretty much enable two-factor auth on your BSD box and just have that little extra bit of protection and peace of mind, which just sounds like a really neat thing. So let me see the article here. Anything special he does to make that work?
No, he's using the Duo Security app,
okay,
which is their big security company. And
yeah,
that's pretty cool.
So it looks like he has login Duo set up. Okay, well, cool. Well, that's definitely, go check that out after the show, and let us know what you think when you guys play with that. I'm looking forward to setting that up in my box here.
Yes.
Okay, so who's our sponsor this week, Alan? Like we have to ask.
Yes, IX Systems.
That's right.
And they have some pictures here from, I imagine these were taken by you mostly.
I think so. I sent him a huge tarball of like 150 megs of photos. And
well, I just remember, in this one picture, you were sitting behind Sean, who was sitting behind me. And so I could tell that was you.
There you go.
Who took a picture of the side of my face.
So we have the link to that on here?
Yep. It's the first link there.
Okay, good
Google
deal.
Plus, and you can see a bunch of images. There's the vendor summit. George live translating the Japanese presentation into English on IRC.
That was a lot of fun.
It was.
Of course, he could have been saying whatever he wanted, and we wouldn't have known the difference.
Yes.
But,
Yep.
We trust
here's
you.
one of the talks, and there's Michael Dexter talking about monitoring the system and checking the performance of Beehive and stuff. There's Chris's presentation. Did somebody else take that picture, maybe?
Yeah. I handed my phone to a few other folks.
Yep. There's Drew sitting at the FreeBSD Foundation table. Hiroki introducing someone. He was the organizer of the presentation. And we got Kirk McCusick and part of your brother's face.
Right.
Here's Matt Ahrens giving a talk about OpenZFS. And there's the IX logo and the FreeBSD logo and SpectraLogic and a whole bunch of other people. Here's lunch. We got awesome little bento boxes. And there's Chris giving his talk wearing an OpenZFS t-shirt.
Of course.
And someone finally explained the OpenZFS logo to me.
What was it?
I'll have to pull up a full screen version of it and explain it after.
Okay.
And here's Drew's presentation on the history of ZFS and how it gets used in FreeNAS and PC-BSD, and how FreeNAS and PC-BSD provide a lot of tools to make using it easier. John's talk about FreeNAS development stuff, and here's a picture from dinner, and a bunch more. Oh, here's some pictures from Beehive. No, this is Dev Summit. Yeah.
Yep, Dev Summit stuff.
More pictures and all kinds of good fun.
Cool. Well, IX Systems put that up last night, I believe. But of course, we want to mention, I mean, aside from uploading photos, they do some other cool stuff.
Well, they sponsored the conference and sent, 4 employees? Something, 3?
Yeah,
anyway.
let's see. Yeah, there was 3 of us there from IX. So, yeah, and all 3 of us spoke. So that was Drew Levine, myself, and John Hickson.
Yeah.
So we appreciate them sending us out there. And, of course, AsiaBSDCon for having us. We had a good time giving our talks and enjoyed talking to folks there. But IX Systems, does a lot more than just that. I mean, they sponsor BSD Canada, EuroBSD. They sponsor a lot of conferences.
The show.
North America as well. Yes, this show. I mean, they're very, very active in the BSD community.
And somehow they managed, while all of you guys were in Tokyo, to release a newer version of FreeNAS.
Yes, they did. Yes, they did. Work doesn't stop just because we're in Tokyo. There's still stuff to get done.
So FreeNAS 9.2.1.3 has been released. They have a bunch of other stuff, and
let's see, that's mostly a bug fix release, if I believe.
And they will keep working on this. So they upgraded Samba, and they think they fixed that FreeBSD, the Samba 100% CPU utilization bug. They've also fixed a 32-bit time machine bug that was in the 9.2.1.2 errata.
Correct.
So this was a known issue in 9.2.1.2 and is now fixed in 9.2.1.3. They've also fixed a bug in libiNotify that accounted for that 100% CPU spin in Samba. So that was people's biggest complaint. So that's fixed now, and that'll look good.
That's fantastic.
And, they keep hammering on that. And, if you want to know more about what's coming up next in FreeNAS, you'll have to stay tuned for our interview with John Hickson, where he talks a bit about that. And they also published a tutorial video on doing the initial setup and using Plex Media Server plugin for FreeNAS. So that'll look, that's a good video.
Yeah, definitely. Plex, I think they said, is their most popular media server plugin that people are using. And I run it here. It's a great app.
Yes, John was talking about it quite a bit to people in the lounge where everybody was hanging out at AsiaBSDCon.
Yep. So as usual, we'll mention this again. Go to ixsystems.com/BSD Now and check out the information on their website there. You can fill out the form and get a free guide to buying servers for open source, things to look for, pitfalls to watch for, what you should and shouldn't do when you're getting ready to purchase any server for some open source application.
It's 11 questions you should ask yourself and your vendor before you buy something. And as you read through them, you'll be like, my vendor wouldn't answer that. My vendor should be IX Systems, and then they would answer that.
That's right. That's right. And then, of course, get in touch with them. If there's anything you need built, big or small, from a FreeNAS mini box to a super high-end server like that monster that they built for the FreeBSD Foundation.
Yep, or, like a workstation like they built for Michael Lucas, or, a little short depth server for, a router or something like they built for me, or, they have, everything in between that. And that new FreeNAS Mini is amazing.
It is pretty sweet.
32 gigs of RAM in your FreeNAS just makes things go.
With that extremely low power Intel chip in there?
Exactly.
That's pretty wild.
With so little, that was always people's main concern with adding yet another machine to their network or whatever. It's like, the power. And well, this one only uses 20 watts.
Yeah, come on.
That's
like running one fluorescent light bulb. That's not very much. But
yes, even cool. Some of those power-saving light bulbs use that much, or if not more. So it's keeping your FreeNAS on now costs less than keeping a light on.
That's right. And it's probably infinitely more useful.
Yep. But also the other advantage of low power is quiet, and it doesn't generate a lot of heat.
So again, URL, ixsystems.com/BSD Now. Check it out, fill out the info, get in touch with somebody. They'll be happy to talk to you and figure out exactly what your needs are and what kind of system will work best in your circumstances.
That's the thing is that they don't just, you don't call them up and say, I want this. You call them up and say, here's my problem.
Yes.
And they build
come up
a
with
solution. Right? So you get that pre-purchase consulting where you actually talk to someone that knows about running FreeBSD servers, right?
And that includes their sales guys.
Yes.
You know how it is. You call some company and the sales guys like Linux. Yeah, we do that, but they don't really know.
Exactly. You know
these guys.
There's a sales guy from a regular place. He's just a sales guy that happens to work at a place that sells computers. Whereas these guys are people that happen to use this stuff every day and can answer all of your questions. And then they give you a quote. When they say they're going to deliver it by this date, it actually gets delivered by that date. And, they build them really nicely.
We should get some pictures to put up on the website of some of the builds they've done.
Yeah. I showed the inside of mine when I bought it, but, it was on the webcam, so it wasn't high def. And mine was so simple you couldn't see the level of detail that goes into it. But, between them and their supplier, Supermicro, you buy the machine and it has SATA cables that were cut exactly to length. And they're zip tied up perfectly, and there's no slack,
little attention to detail.
Because in a 1 or 2 use server, airflow is everything. So having those cables routed perfectly and cut to length is just And then the other thing is the burn-in process, right? They test the machine for, is it 3 or 4 days, something like that, and make sure that everything is going to work and keep working before they ship it to you.
They beat it up really well, because if you're going to have a disk drive fail, that's when it's going to happen.
Yep. If there's a bad memory chip, they're going to find it before they ship it to you, because nothing worse than getting your new box and then it doesn't work yet.
Sure.
Yeah. And even after you buy it, there's still support there. And it's very good. They help me with things that technically they probably shouldn't have needed to help me with. It wasn't their responsibility that I didn't know how to do multipass, but they held my hand through that and got it going.
Okay, we're joined today by Gleb Kurtsou, and he's going to be talking to us about the PEFS encryption module he wrote for FreeBSD. But first of all, welcome. Thank you for being on the show with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Excellent. So go ahead and give us a little bit of background about yourself. How did you first get involved with BSD?
So I think it started at 4.4 or 4.5 era, and I've installed FreeBSD in my desktop, and pretty much the same moment I installed it, I found out that this wasn't that much fun to what was happening in stable, so I switched to current, which was 5 current at that point, and lots of fun was happening there.
Oh yeah.
And I stick to current since then, and running it on my laptops and desktops. And at some point, I've participated in a couple Google Summer of Code as a student project with FreeBSD, and P.E.F.S actually started as a Google Summer of Code project. So at some point, I got FreeBSD commit bit, and I'm now FreeBSD commuter. Trying mostly to work on the P.E.F.S, which is, and my area of interest is usually in the VFS and the file system. I did some TMPFS stuff. So.
Okay.
So what does PEFS stand for, and what exactly is it?
Originally, it stood for Private Encrypted File System, but I like it like it just PEFS, so it's no longer Private Encrypted File System. So I put everywhere it's just a simple PEFS, without explaining this acronym.
So what is it, and what does it do?
It's a stacked cryptographic file system for FreeBSD. The cryptographic is kind of obvious to everybody, but the stack means that it's if you see it is file system that runs on top of another file system. So you may think of it as a null-FS with encryption. So you have one directory and you transparently mount it somewhere else, but you also got your data encrypted and decrypted transparently. So it is like decryption, the file level if you compare it to other block level encryption solutions, and it gives you some flexibility. In a way that, for example, one of the features that I like about P.E.F.S is that each file is independent. So there is no metadata file system level. And you can basically take a file, put it into the directory, and say, okay, PEFS mount this stuff, and I know. And if you know your password, that's all you need to do to just get your stuff decrypted and encrypted.
Yeah. And I guess it lets you take advantage of whatever file system underneath that makes sense for you, like ZFS and replication and stuff like that. Because as far as the underlying file system is concerned, it's just a file with a weird file name.
Weird data.
But weird data, weird file name, and it really works well with ZFS. So, for example, what you would usually do if you have some of your data, you mount it with PEFS and you encrypt it, you create snapshots at ZFS, then you may just copy them, send those snapshots around, do your regular maintenance, backups, and all that stuff. Another interesting example, so I've been doing some backups just right before the New Year's Eve, and it wasn't big backup, but like 15 DVDs or something like that. And it was all encrypted, and the only thing that I would need to do is just take 15 DVDs. I have set of files, just copy those files in the random order to those DVDs, and I'm done. So I can still open any of those DVDs, mount them, mount PFS on top of them, and see my data decrypted. As simple as that.
So how did this development start, and kind of what's the history behind why you did this?
I think it started because of I needed that. I think I was using Jelly or Galley to encrypt my home directory a while back, and the other stack encrypted file system options were not that good, considering especially they all were fuse based, and we didn't have fuse in the kernel back then, and it was really unstable. And I've been using the Galley. I was pretty happy about it until I realized that I need to grow my home file system. So it always happens with home. It's always becomes small at some point. And so it turned out to be really painful. So I would have to make a backup, increase the partition size, create the new Galley volume, put it back again, and it didn't scale. So another cool feature about doing encryption at like file level base is that you may still use the same file system, but individual files may have different encryption keys. You may even think of like doing some sort of security level control if you're interested with stuff like PEFS. So nothing prevents you from using like different keys, different passwords within the same file system, or using the same ZFS file system, and creating several PEFS mounts on top of it. I mean, like mounting separate different directories with PEFS.
Is there a way to encrypt a file to like two different keys, to have two different people able to access it?
This point, they have to share the key. They have to know the key. But that's the way I'd like to proceed with in PEFS development. So make it the way that you can actually share the data that you've encrypted. And it's a related problem that we have in data encryption. It is pretty much the same with Galley, is that we usually have some key that is encrypted with user passphrase, and it's stored as part of metadata somewhere in the disk. And the problem is that to let two people share the data, you have to both of them give passwords. So you just give one of them password, but they still can get the actual key used to encrypt and decrypt the data. And it's get a little bit more complicated because all the procedure says that you need to update your password like every 1 year or whatever number of months. But the problem here is that the data is still encrypted with the same key. Because if intruder, for example, had accessed the key, he knew the actual key that was used to encrypt the data, and you changing the password, it does nothing for him. He still can access the data. I'm trying to address it in PEFS, and I think another thing that PEFS is lacking in is there is no data authentication. So we encrypt stuff, but it doesn't mean that it was actually what you read from there and what you decrypt from there is actually what you intend to get from there, from the encrypted data.
Right, so there's no MAC on it yet?
No MAC on it yet.
So how many people are working on PEFS? Is it just you, or are there other people involved?
At this point, it's me. I think I have one. I get a few questions and people submitting some small patches once in a while, but it's just me, and I have one contributor which did some serious, let's say serious patching, something non-trivial. It's on P.E.F.S is on GitHub, and I encourage everybody to come and do something.
Mm-hmm.
Do something. If you want something, do something. I'll accept all the patches.
Cool.
So could you explain a little further how you maybe compare or contrast this to Jelly, for example, somebody who's coming from that mindset?
I think the only way to look at it is Jelly is what you have. Jelly is what you have encrypted your entire block device, and you create a file system on top of it. Mm-hmm. So if you want to do backup, you would still do encryption somewhere else because the data you send is not encrypted.
Sure.
But if you do P.E.F.S, it's all encryption is a file level. If you just think it that each of my files is encrypted on the file and for the file system beneath P.E.F.S, it is just the same file with weird file name and weird content. It's all the same. It kind of makes sense, and I think makes it really obvious for people. Because if you get into details how to work it at the kernel level, and it gets really confusing. Mm-hmm. So, and by thinking that way, it's getting obvious that you may use all the functionality that your file system provides. In case of ZFS, that may be snapshots that would get encrypted snapshots transparently, and that could be send and receive those snapshots. They're just going to be encrypted just as well.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And I guess that kind of answers the question, but are there any other advantages to file-based encryption over whole disk encryption? Other than, I guess you already mentioned, you can grow the underlying file system without problems, where you'd have that problem with whole disk encryption and the backup
Well, a
stuff.
crypto guy once told me, too, that whole disk encryption meant there was some easier attack vectors, knowing what certain files were and stuff. Is that true, or is that...
I wouldn't say that's actually one is better security-wise than the other. Because if you look at the modern file systems, that what we have now is, especially with ZFS, it's copy and write. So every time you change something, it gets obvious what actually was changed. So it may and it's much easier to get to understand what's being changed in the file system with, for example, with ZFS, than it is, for example, with encrypting the whole drive. It is important to understand for the user what's his intent. So if you're looking for performance and you're looking that, for example, once at some point in the future, you're just going to throw this hard disk away, and you just want to make sure that somebody else who picks it up won't be able to access your data. Probably Jelly is faster. It's better for you because it's supposed to be faster. Because if P.E.F.S is a file system and it has some inherited performance issues, not the issues, but it's on different levels. So you do something for each file, for each directory. There's some work that needs to be done. So it has to be a little bit slower than Jelly, for example.
Sure.
Considering that the encryption is the same. Encryption speed is the same.
Does it support multiple ciphers or key sizes? Are any of the other options flexible?
It does support different key sizes at this point. The only requirement is to have 128-bit block cipher. And so if you look at all modern ciphers, they match this criteria, and requirement comes from XTS mode that's being used for encrypting data. At this point, we only have AES and Camellia, which have been in FreeBSD before I started P.E.F.S. So we support those. Adding new ones, I get once in a while get requests to actually add new ciphers, but my usual reply is that I'm not going to add something new until it is committed to FreeBSD first. Mm-hmm. So if it gets into FreeBSD, there is no problem.
Cool. Are there any other options about the encryption?
You may change the key size,
right?
Default ones. So no, at this point, there's two algorithms, and it's somewhere like what I did at the Google Summer of Code. Looking back then, it all started with using either block cipher in counter mode, or for example, sim mode cipher like Salsa. And the actual problem with that is, especially it's obvious with copy and write file systems with snapshots. So that actually, if you have your data at one point and you have the data updated, for example, you create snapshots and you can compare a file. But by simply storing those two data, you'll just remove the encryption part. So if you understand like what, and this is probably the only difference in design that we had from the original P.E.F.S that was created as Google Summer of Code project and to what we have in P.E.F.S today. It has to be the block cipher. It has to be XTS mode, which is was specifically developed to do encryption at block level devices or some data encryption with larger blocks.
So does it run on any platforms other than FreeBSD?
I mean, FreeBSD sister project is supposed to run on PC-BSD as far as I know.
Yeah, we use it by default.
Yeah, that's awesome, and I really appreciate it, guys.
Oh, no problem. I'm a big fan.
Cool. Because I think that the exposure that P.E.F.S is getting is mostly due to PC-BSD. And there was an article by Chris Moore. Thank you for it, Chris. And I think it's BSD Mac about P.E.F.S, and I think that there was an ongoing effort at least to translate it into Russian, as far as I know. So that's really awesome. I could have never written something like that myself, but it's great, and it's like explains what should be there for people who are not really familiar with the concept of encryption.
Well, I'll keep promoting it for you. It's an awesome it's an awesome kernel module. I love the utility, and like I said, we've been using it. We actually merged it into our head or into our release, so it's built into the kernel and world and all that. And we're not using it as a port anymore.
Yeah, and I hope to actually commit it sometime soon too. But it could have been committed a while back, but I'm trying not to push too hard. I think it's very important to get some crypto audit first. Once it's in place, we can start working on it. And I also would like it not to look kind of hawkish in a way that there are other dependencies, that's something in crypto that needs to be changed in kernel. I try to address all those issues first. And as people, they're very skeptical about changing anything in crypto that works. And then I do it myself. I'm really skeptical. One cannot convince me that something like that needs to be done.
Right.
Sure.
So I do understand their point. It's all valid. For the platforms, if you think of they're like the hardware platforms, because I thought they originally would be the hardware architectures. We only run on Intel architectures for 64 and 32 bits, and it's explicitly disabled for all other architectures. We may have some problems with big endian machines. We've never tested it in one piece of code that I think is VMAC, what we do for verification of the file name. Looking at the code doesn't look like endian friendly, big endian friendly. And I've never tested on the platform that has page sizes larger than 4K, because PFS kind of depends on it. It shouldn't be a problem, but somebody needs to look at it.
Specifically, I guess the question was, how hard would it be to port it to, say, OpenBSD?
To OpenBSD, it should not be really hard. It depends on what the BFS is kind of looking like.
Right.
I've been thinking about doing port to macOS Darwin myself. It's gonna gets postponed.
Sure.
If you even look at the Solaris and the DataFS porting effort, it's not a big difference. Porting it to Linux of use would be much more complicated, because Linux has very different PFS design. Fuse is pretty much the same design, but in the user space.
Right.
Porting it to Open, it is possible. If somebody gets interested, that would be great.
Yeah.
I would just help with everything I can, explaining all the internals.
Right. So explain to us, how does key chaining work? Parent and child keys. What does that look like and mean?
I regret I ever added this stuff. Frankly, it's just so basic, and people keep asking about it, and I'm not sure what to tell about it, because no matter what I tell, people still get confused. Sure. Basically, it's the chain. You have the parent key, you have the child key, and if you, for example, and you have each key is produced out of the passphrase that user specifies. So if you have the passphrase for the parent key, it would automatically add the child key. So you do not even have to know the passphrase for it. By doing so, you may kind of do the security levels or something in that way that I've been thinking of. And if we do PFS 2.0 at some point, I think enable dropless functionality, because it's one of the reasons I got it there in the first place, because I've been thinking about it would be nice to have some minimal sort of deniability, so that you have a system that is really flexible, that you may have as many keys in the file system, as many keys in each directory in the file system, and you may intermix in the keys in the same directory, and you have those key chains. And so, and actually, I think I've even committed an option that would actually generate random key chains and insert it into the database or something like that. And the idea there would be that you put in some random stuff on your file system, and you create this random key chains. And if somebody asks you to provide the key, you say, okay, I have this key, and it decrypts this kind of stuff. And I've intentionally used this option to generate some random stuff. And it's just random. I cannot give you another key, but you may still have another key.
Right.
And it's good in theory, and everybody who's trying to do something like in the way of deniability, that not really works, even if we look for some stuff like true crypt. It works to some extent, but with stacked cryptographic file system, it's a bit more complicated. If you have ZFS with copy on write, and it is obvious what's being changed in the file system level beneath P.E.F.S. So, and it is flexible, and because of that, we cannot it may get confusing for the user in some rare situation. For example, if you have the same file encrypted, the same file name encrypted with different keys, and you add two of those keys to the P.E.F.S file system, it is not it is unspecified behavior which actually file you're gonna see. Like if you do ls or open the file, you should not be doing that. Like you may do that, but you should know what you are doing. And its idea there is that to let user do perform some deniability. So if, for example, somebody knows that they have file called X, and I create the file called X with one encryption key in the same directory, I create the same file X, but with another key, and I never put in just two keys. So, but it's good in theory. I'm not sure it's going to really work.
Right. So can you tell us a little bit about the PAM module and how users leverage that?
The PAM module allows you to authenticate, to log into the system with your P.E.F.S key and add the P.E.F.S key to the file system. It has to be a home directory transparently. So the way you do it is once you log in, you enter your username and then to your P.E.F.S password. And it may be actually different P.E.F.S password thanks to the key chains that we have. So, and it's if the key is valid, and the file system has to also be mounted. It adds the key to the file system, and for the user, it's kind of confusing. Why doesn't it mount my file system? And I think it is security consideration. If you want to do some mounting, you'd better do some mounting with another module. But I would rather set it up the way that at admin level, that different PAM modules do not mount stuff back and forth. But
right.
It's actually making it much simpler.
Right. Well,
just putting in the key.
Depending on the configuration of the system, normally only root can mount a file system anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. That's another good point.
So does it make any use of AES-NI, and what kind of overhead are we looking at with and without?
It does use ASNI, and I think it does it pretty much as at the point when ASNI appeared in Current. I remember giving some talk at the FreeBSD Developers Conference. I think it was 2010. And looking at the slides, I did ASNI, include ASNI in the charts for comparison back then. And I've been using ASNI all the time, and I have no idea what it looks like without it. It's supposed to be much slower. Another interesting point is that there was some improvements to ASNI in FreeBSD probably 2 or 3 months ago. And I'm looking forward into incorporating those into P.E.F.S. It's not directly usable because it was implemented at the Open Crypto Framework level. And PFS is not using Open Crypto because it's was designed originally for the for the network stack. So if you get the packet, you schedule a task to decrypt and encrypt your data, and once it's done, you get the data back. You get into processing the data back, which is not really what we do in the file system. If you read the data, you need to decrypt and encrypt it right now, and if you not to lose all the logs, it would get complicated. And I think we'll start the work on actually incorporating those changes and only the performance improvements.
Cool. So has P.E.F.S undergone any kind of security audit?
Security audit has just started in February. It's supposed to be completed by the end of February. And I'll share the results once it's available. And it's probably, I won't be the first to actually find out about the results, because it will probably be disclosed. I'd like not to share any additional details on who does the audit and things like that until it's actually completed. So, because it's not yet completed.
Right.
Once it's done, and I think it's a very important milestone for the P.E.F.S to get the audit, even if that could be just a small kind of audit, the initial audit or something like that. It would get us really closer to actually committing it to FreeBSD.
Cool.
Yeah, I saw one of the Linux files, I think it was ENCFS or something, got like a 10-hour audit, and they found a bunch of fairly obvious stuff.
We're trying to do exactly the same.
Cool.
And it would be really interesting actually to compare the guy who did the ENC file system audit also did eCrypt.FS, which is kernel level file system, also stack cryptographic file system in Linux. And I think Ubuntu uses it to encrypt their home directories, so I'm not sure. So it would be interesting to actually compare audits of all those three file systems and see how different they are. And because nobody did that, and like for the user, it's like makes no difference which one should I use, and there is no answer to that question.
Yeah.
He may only compare the performance, but if you're looking at the cryptographic file system, which the expectation should be different from.
Right. Yeah. And when it's your encrypted file system, performance shouldn't be the first thing you're worried about.
Yeah. So how can people get involved with helping in development, and what do you currently need?
It's on GitHub. If you search for P.E.F.S, you should just find it, and the set of links everywhere. The links and ports to GitHub repositories, some wiki documentation, the cross-link back and forth. For the known issues, I think if you look at the null.fs development that happened in the past year, maybe a little bit more than that, and FreeBSD currently, which is now 10. I'd like to incorporate those changes to P.E.F.S. None of them are critical. It's mostly about if you start something, if you're using like the executable to execute some program and it's still running, you cannot unlink it or something like that. It's minor stuff, and I doubt the way people usually use P.E.F.S, they should actually know is there something not okay there. I think there was a report that something wasn't good with P.E.F.S and NFS. I didn't look into it, and I have no idea what's going on there. So that's what we have on top of my head. And I also mentioned that we should do some do some work to incorporate into existing crypto framework that we have in FreeBSD. Make ISNI with recent performance improvements, like a first-class citizen, to make it useful. We also have some crypto code that lives in Galileo, but which is actually generic crypto code, and like to expose it to other parts of the system. Because, for example, P.E.F.S is using. Those are minor bits, and have patches for those, but it's the matter of the patches being reviewed before the and reaching the agreement within the developers what needs to be done.
Cool. And so, I guess you already mentioned this, but the ultimate goal is to get this into head. I guess there's not really a timeline for that, but.
There is no timeline. I kind of was hoping to make it into 10 stable before 10 was branched. Didn't happen, mostly because I didn't have enough time to devote to P.E.F.S back then. Now that if crypto audit completes, I will try to do my best to spend much more time into that and get it finally into head. Because if you search through email archives, it was brought up like at least 3 times, I think, committing, and nobody kind of objected it. Said like, okay, we need to do this, we need to get crypto audit, but if you really want, you can probably do it. But meanwhile, nobody also got enthusiastic about committing, probably except the PC-BSD and x16 guys.
Hey, after the audit's done, after you take a look at that, just commit it, dude. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'll try it.
Okay.
But I'd like to make it clean, but not just commit whatever I have and
Right.
wait for somebody else to clean it up. So
Right.
Well, I'm going to track you down. We're going to get this committed. I want it in this year. It would be helpful to, because we've been maintaining that set of patches into our tree, and it'd be nice to get that merged in here soon.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing about FreeBSD, right? It's like get it up in head so that you don't have to maintain it.
Yep.
Yeah, actually, it's the regular maintenance happens like automatically. So
Right.
if people see that there is another file system that does exactly the same thing, and there, like, if you look at, do we have something that is done the same way that, for example, ZFS does it for mapped files, which is different from what UFS does. Somebody changed ZFS. They look at it's used the same code somewhere else. Just probably need to update it there, and it happens automatically. Mm-hmm. But some of the stuff, like, it is not regular maintenance and just keeping it with the working shape. And actually, we have another problem with, and having it in head won't make it much simpler. For example, the packaging, because we have a problem that once we had 9.0 branched, some changes went into the PFS layer, and what we have now is kernel modules built for 9.0 cannot be used at 9.2, for example. Right. And it's there is really not much that can be done about it, and we're supposed not to break kernel API anyway within the stable release branch, but it happened. And PFS looks like the only module that is in force that's been outside of the kernel source tree. Right. So if it wasn't the kernel source tree, that wouldn't happen. User would just have it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, I think you'll see a lot more people using it too once it goes into hex. There's still a number of people I talked to are like, no, I didn't even know that was in the ports tree. And if it just showed up, people would be like, ooh, another encryption option. Yeah. Let's give that a whirl.
And just especially with the way that it plays so nice with ZFS, I can just see all kinds of uses for it.
Well, we're using it as the basis for our backup solution right now, the life preserver, where we use P.E.F.S. We can encrypt your data, send the snapshots back and forth, replicate, do bare metal restores, and you don't have to worry about who's on the remote end.
Yeah, so that's really cool.
Anybody's FreeNAS can hold your data because it's encrypted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so again, my hat off to you on it, because it's made our lives a lot easier, and we really use it in some cool ways.
And my hat off to you for just making it publicity you create for the project. I really appreciate.
Sure, no problem.
And getting it tested helps a lot.
Mm-hmm. It does. It does. Yeah, we found some early bugs where we were setting passwords on the command line. Got those knocked out, but yeah, since then it's been smooth sailing. Haven't had a problem since. PAM module works like a champ. So
cool. Really glad to hear that too.
Oh. Well, is there anything else you'd like to mention as we end the interview?
No, not really. Just thank you guys for having me. Thanks again for the publicity.
Oh, excellent. Well, thank you so much for being on with us today, Gleb, and we'll track you down later and make sure we get that committed here, hopefully this year. I'm counting on it.
The year has just started, so when it was about committing 10 stable, everybody was okay. 10 is 2 years ahead of us, so we're gonna have time to commit it. But we need to do something this time.
Okay. Well, cool. Well, thanks for being on the show with us this week. Okay, in the day and age we live in, it seems security and privacy have been pretty much thrust into the forefront of all the computing world. More than ever, users and companies are trying to find ways to keep their private data really private. Encryption's always been a good choice, and there's a number of utilities you can use, some commercial, some open source, some maybe kernel level, some user land. On FreeBSD, most users have been using the kernel level Jelly framework, usually for low-level disk encryption. Typically, this would sit underneath the user's file system, such as UFS or ZFS. This may be less than optimal in a few situations, such as wanting to encrypt only a single directory or wanting to replicate, for example, ZFS snapshots, which sit on top of the jelly layer. So enter the new PEFS framework. PEFS, which stands for Private Encrypted File System, is a kernel-level stacked cryptographic file system for FreeBSD. But one of the main differences between, say, Jelly and PEFS is that while Jelly may sit below your file system, encrypting blocks of data before it hits the disk, PEFS is going to sit above it. So it's going to be encrypting files and directories before they hit the underlying file system, such as ZFS in this case. This allows PEFS to run easily on top of ZFS, which can be a benefit when you want to replicate the encrypted data using the ZFS send and receive functionality. In addition, PEFS also comes bundled with a PAM module, allowing for entire home directories to be encrypted and then decrypted based upon the login into the system, which can be really beneficial to a multi-user workstation.
Yep.
So in today's tutorial, we're going to be taking a look at how to install and create PEFS encrypted directories, as well as enabling the PAM logins for the PEFS home directory encryption. So let's take it away here, Alan.
Yep. So I've installed the PEFS kernel module from the package system. You can also do this from the ports tree, especially if you're running head or something where you're going to, there's not going to be package for it. That loads in your kernel.
It won't take long to compile. And we include it out of box on PC-BSD 9.2 and later.
Yep. So I'll load the kernel module. Yeah, it's small. And also, when we, on TechSnap, when we talked about FreeBSD, the kind of Linux thing that's, I don't think, really related, it got a security audit, and they found a bunch of problems with it. So Matt Olander from IX Systems paid to have a security audit done of PEFS, and they found that it's actually much better. And there's a few minor concerns, but those will be addressed. And yeah, so I'll throw a link to that audit of the PEFS security system into the show notes as well.
Okay, cool.
Right, so you load the kernel module. Now, if you're probably going to want this to be loaded automatically. So if you edit your /boot/loader.conf, then you can add PEFS_load equals yes, and now it will be loaded automatically when you boot. So now, if I just make the directories encrypted and unencrypted, you can do this in the same directory, but I'm going to do the two separate ones to demonstrate the differences.
Sure. Gets a little confusing if you're typing in the same names over and over.
Well, there's that, but this way, normally, that way when you mount it, you can't see and create a file on it, you can't see what the encrypted version looks like. And this way, it'll make it easier for you to see what's happening here. So by default, PEFS does not store metadata related to your keys on the disk unless you create a keychain. So we'll do that anyway. So if you have just one password, it doesn't need to store anything. But the up and down at the same time side to that is that when you enter the passphrase, you can't tell if it worked until you try to read a file, which might be a desire of yours. Make it harder for someone to try to brute force it or whatever. Or maybe it'll be annoying. You type out your password and you thought it worked and then it didn't. So if you have a keychain, it can actually tell whether your password is the right one or not, because it can tell whether it can read the keychain or not. So we'll just do PEFS. Oops, I'm in the wrong window, and that's causing stuff to move. Anyway, if we do PEFS add chain force Z, and then we'll do the encrypted directory. And type in our passphrase. The Z flag there is used to specify that the keychain will consist of only a single parent key. You can actually do chains to basically have a master key that can unlock subkeys and so on. And it won't have any children. The -F key will skip checking the underlying file system to see if it's already encrypted. So I suppose we didn't actually need that, but anyway.
Didn't it? Yeah.
And next, it'll mount the PEFS file system. So now, if we do PEFS mount encrypted on unencrypted, there we go. And so now the unencrypted file system only contains that PEFS database. So if we look in the unencrypted, we'll see it just has that. And if we look in the encrypted directory, we'll see the same thing.
And a small note, at this point, encrypted should be read-only.
Unencrypted is. Encrypted is the source directory, so it's fine. And but unencrypted will be mounted.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, you can see that it's unencrypted is mounted on encrypted, and yeah, it'll be read-only because we haven't entered a passphrase yet. So now we'll do PEFS add key on the encrypted directory, enter our passphrase, and now it's mounted read-write. So the -C flag there is used to check that the key supplied is actually accepted by the keychain. So now if we go into that, if we go into that unencrypted directory again, we can say, testing to create a little text file. And we look, and there's our text file, and if we read it, it's got our content, and so on. But if we go over to that encrypted directory, if the file system wasn't mounted, if we hadn't entered our password, then this is what you see now. Just this gibberish file name, and if we look at that gibberish file, it's just full of gibberish. So now, but on the unencrypted directory, we still have the regular files. But say we are done with our encrypted USB key or home directory or whatever, we do PEFS flush keys on the unencrypted directory. And now it only has the encrypted contents. So yeah, in the tutorial we used the encrypted and unencrypted directory, but you could do all this with just one directory, say your home directory.
Sure.
And that way, when it's mounted with the key, you'll see your files, and when it's mounted, and when you flush the key or haven't entered the key yet, then all you see is this encrypted gibberish files.
Just the garbage, yeah.
And yes, like Chris mentioned at the top of the tutorial, the main time this comes in handy is if you're doing ZFS replication, because when you're replicating off to maybe say you're doing remote replication to your friend's FreeNAS box, and he's going to replicate to your FreeNAS box, right? You're just trading offsite backups. If you have Geli, then ZFS is on top of that. So when you send the files to your friend's FreeNAS, he has all your files. With P.E.F.S, all he has is a bunch of files with really weird names that he can't read. And that makes a difference.
It does.
Yep. And this lets you have the encryption on top of ZFS, and ZFS is fine with it because it doesn't care what the file's named or what it contains.
Okay, next up, our weekly news roundup. So first up, we're going to mention BSDCan 2014 registration is now open. So there's no excuse. If you're in North America and you can get to Ottawa, we would love to see you guys out there.
Yes.
Should be a good conference. It is every year.
Yes,
but
it's huge.
They seem to be getting bigger and bigger every year, just like AsiaBSDCon was this last week. So
I'm looking forward to seeing lots of people.
So I guess the website also has the prices are available along with a full list of presentations that'll be coming up at the conference.
It's
so
very reasonably priced. It's $195 for the whole weekend, US or Canadian.
Nice.
Which is quite a deal for Canadians because the way the exchange rate is just now. When you decided to do that a couple months ago, it probably wasn't quite the big a difference, but anyway.
Sure. And of course, there's the tutorials leading up to the conference,
yes,
too.
Yes, those are always really good.
Topics.
You can look through the list of the ones that are available and choose which ones you want to take. And they're $60 for each half day. Most of the tutorials are half day, although if Kirk's doing his, that's a full day, so you'd have to buy both parts of it.
Sure.
Which I wish I would be able to get to, but I can't. I'll be busy at the Dev Summit.
Sure.
But
oh yeah, speaking of Dev Summit, so if you're a FreeBSD developer or committer and you'd like to go to that, or just curious and want to get somebody to invite you to it because it's an invited-only event, definitely get in touch with somebody, get on that list. The Developer Summit
is amazing, and last year's BSDCan, there were about 100 FreeBSD people at the Developer Summit. It was huge. We did a giant group picture.
Yeah, it was pretty epic. So pretty much, if you can get out to Ottawa, there's no excuse to not go.
Yeah, tutorials include Massimiliano Stucci from RIPE is giving one on IPv6. Then they got Peter Hanstein giving one on P.E.F. He's the guy that wrote the book of P.E.F. And then that night, Drew is running the doc sprints. So if you want to learn about docs or help out with those for any of the projects, you can duck your head in at 6 o'clock after you've had time to eat.
Nice.
On the second day, there's the transitioning to OpenBSD 5.5 with Peter Hanstein. And then Michael Lucas is giving one on sudo based on his
new book.
Yeah. And then the registration pub opens up, so you can get your T-shirt and your badge and all that stuff and hang out with everybody at the bar. And then after that's over, Drew's having another doc sprint.
Well, that's good. They say doc sprints are a great way to get involved.
Yes.
We had an interview with Drew we did in Tokyo.
When
so
we recorded the interview, she mentioned it specifically, so that'll be interesting.
Yeah, we'll try and get that played here, hopefully before BSDCan. Give people an idea what a doc sprint looks like.
And they can make sure they show up for that. So on the first day of the conference, they have in-kernel Open vSwitch on FreeBSD, which is using, this is from the creator of NetMap, and it's about how to create a switch on FreeBSD, mostly for switching between multiple virtual machines running on the computer, but plenty of other things you can do with it. Massimiliano is giving another IPv6 transitioning mechanisms on the BSDs, and Dylan Lee is giving a forensic timestamp analysis of ZFS. So using ZFS metadata to enhance timeline analysis and detect forged timestamps and things like that. Then Werner Loesch is giving one about NAND flash in FreeBSD. He used to work at Fusion.io, so he knows all about flash. Then there's also user space networking with libuinet with Patrick Kelsey. He's talking about a TCP/IP stack that runs in userland, but is still performant. And then there's porting OpenBSD to MIP64 Octeon. Capsicum and Casper as a lipstick on a pig with Powell PJD. Optimizing Geli performance with John Mark Gurney. He's the guy that added all the speed boost to AES-NI in Geli recently, so he's giving a talk about that. And Peter Hessler, who is the very first guest on this show, is talking about using BGP real-time import and export for spam blacklist. So what's changed on that since last year? And because he couldn't make it to BSDCan last year, so that talk's never been given in North America, only in Asia.
Oh, nice.
Dwayne Hart is giving a talk on migrating from Linux to FreeBSD as a backend data store for stuff. Then Daichi Goto is giving shell scripts and commands, practical development method for large-scale academic research and mission-critical business systems. We had talked
some pretty wild stuff with shell.
Yes, there was one of the work-in-progress sessions at the end of AsiaBSDCon, and Daichi's talk last year at BSDCan about how much they use shell just for even like point-of-sale system written in shell and things like that, and also outperforming Hadoop on processing like 12 million customer records, things like that. And then Henning Brouwer is giving the talk he gave in Asia, which is OpenBGPD turning 10 and how that went, and the lessons they've learned over the last 10 years. There's a talk on FreeBSD BMake and the meta mode, which I think is for building without root privileges. Keeping current, which is how Benno Rice is giving a talk on how to maintain an internal fork of FreeBSD. So if you work for a vendor or somebody who builds something on top of FreeBSD, it's the practical bits of copying FreeBSD feature enhancement into your version and keeping your version up to date and in sync with your patches. Part of that is giving back as much as you can to the project, but also what it takes internally to actually do that. So instead of having to find out for yourself, one of the other vendors is going to share that with you. And then Arun Thomas is giving a talk about BSD ARM, the kernel internals, and how the FreeBSD and NetBSD ARM code actually work. And then Drew is having another doc sprint. And then that's only the first day. Then on the second day,
gee whiz.
Yeah, Julio Marino's giving a talk about the FreeBSD test suite. Chris Moore, who's that, is giving a talk about snapshot replication in boot environments. And Ingio Suarez is giving a talk about Mandoc, replacing the tools used to make man pages. Then Vsevolod Stashkov is giving a talk. He invented the new solver for package-ng, which will be in package-ng 1.3 that's coming out soon. Right? So he was a Google Summer of Code student who built this new way of solving the dependencies in package. Because of that, the annoying thing of, when the version of Perl changes and you had to do that package set -o, blah, 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 the new solver apparently will be able to take care of that for you.
Nice.
Yeah, exactly. And then Matt Ahrens will be giving OpenZFS upcoming features and performance enhancements. Hopefully by BSDCan, some of the stuff they did at Delphix that they just open sourced a week or two ago will actually be in FreeBSD. That'll be cool. And then taking the red pill, charting the rabbit hole of improving FreeBSD performance on Zen. That sounds interesting. Roger's been committing like 40 patches on Zen for a while now. Lots of improvements to make FreeBSD work better inside the Zen hypervisor. Take advantage of all the offloading and stuff. Transparent super pages for FreeBSD on ARM with, I'm not going to try to pronounce that Polish guy's name. But we met him in Tokyo. He's a very nice guy. And then John Hickson's giving an introduction to developing stuff on FreeNAS. And Sean Webb is giving his talk on the ASLR improvements he did for FreeBSD.
Okay.
Fabio Belznov is giving his talk on using FreeBSD on the BeagleBone Black for robotics applications. That type of stuff is always interesting. Video streaming and stuff from a robot using a BeagleBone. And then Pedro Gaffini is giving a talk on the features of and status of FreeBSD's ext2 implementation, which is for reading Linux file systems. And Craig Rodriguez is giving his talk on Jenkins, the continuous integration testing tool on FreeBSD, as well as using Beehive and WebDriver to do all that continuous testing on FreeNAS. And he's since started making it work for FreeBSD as well.
Yeah, he's been working heavily on that.
And then there's the closing session, which always includes a charity auction, where the vendors and other people will have a bunch of stuff, swag and posters and stuff. Like you see those awesome posters behind Chris. There's usually a couple of those up for grabs.
These guys back here.
And those go up for auction, and all the donations are all the money is donated to the Ottawa Mission, which is a good charity. And then there's also the doc sprint, and also there's a hackers lounge each night of the conference, which is they just have this big room with lots of tables and lots of power, and people sit around working on stuff. And
that's the time to go track down some of those annoying bugs that you've wanted to have fixed for a while.
Yes, being able to sit down with the guy who developed the system and be like, here, let me show you the problem I'm having, rather than just describe it in an email. And then, because it's right there, they want to dig into it. And many patches come out of hacker lounges.
Definitely.
We kind of turned the end of the dev summit into a hacker lounge. Me and Sean made a patch for wireless and so on. So it's always lots of fun. Yep.
Cool.
So next story.
So again, super big conference,
Yes.
lots of stuff going on. Please come if you can get there, by all means.
If you can manage to find a time on that schedule where you don't want to be in at least 2 places at once, I would be amazed. I'm going to be lucky because a couple of the talks from Tokyo are going to be there. It will lighten my load slightly because it's like, I got to see that in Tokyo.
Already heard
Hopefully
that
they haven't changed too much in the last couple of months.
Definitely. Okay, so next news article, we have some big changes for OpenBSD 5.6. So even though they've already frozen 5.5 and the release process has started, 5.6 is already looking promising.
Yes.
Wow, they're really pushing hard on this stuff. So OpenBSD for a long time has included a heavily patched version of Apache based on 1.3. But now they've imported Nginx into the base a few years ago and have finally taken the plunge and removed Apache. Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yep.
SendMail is also no longer the default MTA. OpenSMTPD is the new default.
Yep. And
they're looking at possibly removing bind next, just like a FreeBSD did.
Yep.
So that's kind of cool.
And they're also getting rid of a couple of the ports that nobody uses, the HP300, NVMe 68K, and NVMe 88K. Which sound like really old hardware that nobody has anymore.
Yeah. So doing some cleanup, it looks like they're tree, but yeah.
Because Henning was on Sunday night when we were all sitting around in the hotel lobby drinking. Henning was mentioning to Eric Ullman, who started SendMail, that he deleted SendMail, and Eric's like, "Thank you." People yelling at me.
Oh, there you go.
And they said if you still need Apache or SendMail, they're in the OpenBSD port stream.
Sure.
Apparently,
so
they're still
available.
maintaining their fork, so Apache-HTTPD-OpenBSD will still be the maintained 1.3 version of Apache, or you can install the newer 2.4 or whatever from the history.
So you got transition time. They're not going to force you to move right away. You can still grab the old version.
Depending what you're doing, Nginx isn't always an option. But if it is, Nginx is amazing.
Yes. Cool. Okay. Getting to know your port manager lurkers. So I guess we're going to be doing some more on the Getting to Know Your Port Manager series. It's making its return, and this time they're talking with Dan Fee, who probably is most known for being the NVIDIA driver maintainer, but he also does a lot of other port stuff.
Cool.
So how he got into FreeBSD, he said he wanted a Unix system that he could understand that would not get bloated as time goes by. That's noble goals there. Mentioned he's still heavily involved with the project, lots more that he's doing. Anything else interesting you wanted to pull out of there, Alan?
He's from Russia. And he liked FreeBSD for even after 15 years. He still likes how FreeBSD feels, and he uses NVI because he says in 2014 I can still have a modern Unix system, which still works like it's 1999.
Partying like it's 1999.
He can still have a text console, which he likes, and start X11 with StartX and play around and so on. And his favorite TV show is The X-Files.
Nice. Wow, classic, but still a good show. Cool. Okay. Well, next up, we have our PC-BSD Weekly Digest. Indeed. So first I'll mention we released PC-BSD 10.0.1 while I was in Tokyo. So this is just a quarterly update. It's still based on FreeBSD 10 release, so don't get too freaked out. The kernel's the same and all that. It's just our quarterly package update. So you get newer versions of KDE, GNOME, Cinnamon. All those goodies are in there, plus all the latest bug fixes and improvements to our utilities tree. We also ported over Pulse Audio to 10.0.1, the latest Pulse Audio 5.0, I believe. And TJ wrote a note here. Why did we do that? Well, let me tell you, TJ, there's a lot of packages and ports in the tree which are coming from Linux and expect Pulse Audio to work. So not having it work out of box really sucked, and now it does work. And that's going to let us do some cool video chat stuff too.
Yep, and as you said, that Firefox works better with it as well.
Yes, it does. It does. So we were able to switch over to it in a few cases, and it just seems to work better. Plus, it'll be neat eventually to be able to do some integration with other Pulse Audio stuff on the network and send sound over the wire to different boxes and stuff. So brings in some new functionality. Doesn't necessarily remove any old functionality. It just adds on to what we had. So there's also a new PC mixer utility being worked on for sound management. So one thing we've been trying to do, since PC-BSD has a lot of different desktops and window managers built in, we've tried to integrate all our tools so they look the same between them. And there have been utilities like network management, for example. We wrote our own network manager. We've written our own display manager, etc. We're trying to write all these utilities on our own so that no matter what window manager you pick, we don't have to rely on GNOME having a working mixer this week. And KDE is also working, and XFCE is also working. We can just have one consistent one.
And that probably makes Drew's job easier when she's doing screenshots of how to control the volume. It's one tool no matter which OS, which desktop environment you're using.
Well, so good example. We my brother Ken wrote a utility called the mount tray, and so this just sits in your tray and it handles all the mounting, like when you plug in a USB stick or a DVD drive or attach a new hard drive or whatever. It does all that auto detection and will mount it for you, unmount it, do all the cleanup. Just because a lot of window managers either don't have a mounting utility, or the one they have works differently in every window manager, doesn't work at all.
Depends on Linux.
Very Linux specific,
things like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of that's the problem with a lot of these desktops coming from Linux is they have very Linux specific bits, especially related to like how hardware and device drivers work and whatnot. So writing our own has been a better solution. Just it provides a consistent experience across the whole platform, all the window managers. So that stuff's being worked on. We've also updated a lot of PBIs for 10.01. There's been some updates to GNOME and Mate. Life Preserver got some of the new cool stuff I talked about in Tokyo, where we can do automatic snapshots and backups where it'll snap every 5 minutes and then keep one at the top of an hour and then keep a daily for a week.
I have that going on my laptop now because, you'll be doing something and then you'll be like, shit, I just deleted something I didn't want to, or I just overwrote something I didn't want to. And it's like, my last snapshot was 3 weeks ago. Whoops.
Yeah. So no, we have all this built into Life Preserver now. So hopefully that never happens to you again. You just go, let me roll back that file to 10 minutes ago. Done.
Yep.
So it's pretty cool. And that'll work with all the offsite replication to say a FreeNAS box as well.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm using on all my systems here.
Question about that. Is there a way to disable the little notification pop-up saying I took a snapshot?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. When you update to 10.01, you can right click on the Life Preserver tray down there and you can change the pop-up settings to either none, warnings only, or show all. Okay. So if you want to get the gory details every 10 minutes snapshotting, great. If not, you can hide those.
Yeah, well, yeah, if it's snapshotting every 10 minutes, you probably don't want a bubble.
Yeah, you don't want them. It just gets annoying. I set mine to warning only, so it only ever pops up if something doesn't work. Went sideways. Yeah. But anyway, that's out now, so feel free to try it, see what you think. And yeah, so that's the end of our weekly news roundup. We'll be right back in a moment with feedback and questions from you in the audience. Okay, first up in our weekly feedback section, we have a question from Alex. So he says, hi, BSD Now team. Thanks for the great podcast and a lot of the info you shared with us. He says he uses FreeBSD 10 without a desktop manager. Instead of this, he always uses a simple tiling window manager like Rat Poison or Awesome. So are there any advantages to using PC-BSD over a vanilla FreeBSD in my scenario? So if yes, which ones? Well, I'd like to think there are. So yeah, we include Rat Poison, Awesome, i3, a bunch of really lightweight tiling window managers. So you can always use those out of box. But the cool thing is, even though you're using a tiling window manager, if you're running on PC-BSD over vanilla FreeBSD, you'll be able then to launch our control panel and use our utilities for doing everything from sound configuration to setting up snapshots of your ZFS.
So boot environments tool.
Boot environments, yeah. I mean, gosh, we got so much stuff in our control panel now. I have to look in there.
There's like the number of utilities that start with PC dash.
Yeah, has gone way up.
Yep.
There's a lot of stuff in there.
There's that separate ZFS manager tool. That one's amazing.
We got a disk management utility. We even have a graphical package manager, so you can do package NG stuff graphically now.
Well, that's the other thing is you have your own package NG repo for PC-BSD, which has different default options. Specifically, X for everything is turned on. That means that you can get graphical versions of lots of tools, and that when you download the tool, it will have useful options instead of no options.
Correct. Enlightenment built with all the GL goodies turned on, so you get that out of box that I'm to recompile. I mean, there's just cups is turned on everything, etc. So and then in the control panel
is in there.
Yeah, jail management. Let's see, I mentioned the Life Preserver for backups. It'll auto-detect your printer config, sound config, disk management. There's a Bluetooth manager for doing initial pairing. Oh, the mount tray. So if you plug in a USB stick, it'll pop up and mount it for you.
Yeah.
Like just all that stuff will work.
You're looking at doing a 10 stable build so that people will be able to update incrementally to snapshots of FreeBSD stable, which means getting fixes and features more quickly.
Yeah, now that I'm not preparing for Tokyo, I may actually get that done here in the next couple weeks.
Because quite a few improvements to Beehive have gone in since 10 release, including one that solves a problem if you try to use more than 3 gigs of RAM in a CentOS virtual machine. The Vertio stuff doesn't work, and then it won't write to the hard drive. That fix went in like 2 days too late to make it into the release. And so if you want to boot
we will try and roll a stable release for you here shortly, and I still have a current build to do that's on my to-do list, so hopefully we'll get that as well.
Exactly.
But so there's plenty of reasons, Alex, why you'd want to run the PC-BSD rolled version with even with Rat Poison or Awesome. I mean, just all the little bonus stuff that comes with it.
Yeah, like the Wi-Fi utility that works.
Yes. Being able to right click and say connect to network and not have to touch WPA supplicant is pretty handy.
Yep.
So cool. Okay, well, Alex, I hope that answered your question, and let us know if you try it or switch over, and let us know how your mileage goes with that.
Yep.
All right, next question, Alan, from Ben. So I'll let you read this one.
Hi guys, by default a new FreeBSD jail behaves like any other new FreeBSD installation, and it runs sendmail and listens on localhost on port 25. To improve security, I was wondering if it is possible to not allow sendmail to listen on port 25, instead simply force mail from the jail to use the host machine. There's a couple ways you can do that. Like normally in a jail it listens on localhost, but jails don't have a loopback adapter. They only have the one IP that you assign them, and so that means that they're listening on port 25 on that. which might not be what you intend. So if you look in etc-defaults-rc.conf, you can see examples of all the switches for changing sendmail. And I think there is one where you can disable the daemon. And then one of the nice things about the way the IP stack for jails works now, traditionally you were instructed to make sure nothing was listening on the IP that you were going to give the jail. But now it has this overlay behavior. So if something in the jail is not listening on port 25 and you connect to the jail's IP on port 25, if the daemon on the host is listening on all IP addresses on port 25, that will fall through and connect. So if you've configured the sendmail on your host system to listen on all IPs on port 25 instead of only on localhost on port 25, then if sendmail is disabled in the jail, when you try to connect to port 25 in the jail, it'll fall through and hit port 25 on the host.
Yeah.
So that's one way to do it. The other one is to use the smart host setting in sendmail and say, hey, sendmail, when you get email, just forward it to this. Normally it's for your ISP's mail server, but it could just be the mail server on your host machine. He said he's tried disabling sendmail and setting up the Dragonfly mail agent. He says he's having difficulty with the aliases file. He has redirected the mail from root to root at hostmachine.local, but he's having a DNS failure. Your host file should be working, so I imagine that depends what the issue is. Depending on my setup, some of my jails I specifically black hole the email because I don't want the email out of the jail. And then some of them, yes, I just forward it, and I have, my Puppet pushes a config into the jails that says, hey, forward the email through this server. It kind of depends what the jail's for. I have many jails that are just, I wanted an isolated environment to test this, right? So it's like EasyJail create a ports jail and go in there and, test a new port I'm building to make sure it compiles properly without mucking up my system. Or also to make sure it does things like creating the user, right? The users already exists on my system because I've installed the port before. And rather than having to delete it and mess around, just give me a fresh jail and make sure that the port compiles properly in a fresh jail and pulls in all the dependencies and compiles them properly and so on. So, yeah, I'm not sure why you're having a DNS problem there. But one thing to check is that by default, it will, if it doesn't find the host name, it will append the domain name to the end of the host name. So it might actually be looking up hostmachine.local.local or something. So in your host file, if you're putting in the entire absolute name you want, you need to put a dot at the end to indicate it's the end and that it shouldn't suffix that short name with the domain name. That's likely the problem you're having. But I don't have any other ideas beyond that.
Okay.
So next up, Nick write in asking about FreeNAS. He said he would love to set up a FreeNAS box either on his own or to buy a FreeNAS Mini from IX. But his biggest concern is data security. I want the data stored on the box to be encrypted and all connections to the machine to be secure. He said he'd be connecting to it from OS X and Linux. What is the best way to go about doing this? Well, if you're using FreeNAS, you have the option of the AES-NI-based Geli encryption, so to encrypt everything before it hits the disks, and that's good. As far as a secure connection to the machine, it depends how you're connecting to it. If it's on your LAN, that's usually pretty secure, but you can, I suppose there's a couple different things you could do. You look at something like SSHFS or, is there a VPN module for plugin for FreeNAS? I don't think so.
Yeah, not that I know of off the top of my head. But
VPN over your LAN is kind of overkill.
Yeah.
Yeah, you haven't really told us enough about your setup to know what you want to be secure. But, if your FreeNAS is only on your LAN and not exposed to the internet, then that should be pretty secure.
Sure. I mean, if you want to go really secure, and just share files through, I don't know, just SSH and use SFTP, you can do that.
Yeah, and
it just depends on the protocols you want to use too.
Or SSHFS to mount it, but you can disable NFS and Samba if you don't want to use them, but
sure.
On my LAN, there's nothing that shouldn't be there, so I have Samba.
Yep. Okay. Well, if you have any more details on your setup there,
maybe we can give you a better answer with more details.
Sure. Okay. So next one we have from Sammy. So he has a quick question. He says he mentions on several occasions that LZ4 will determine if data about to be written to the disk can be compressed and write uncompressed if it doesn't compress enough. 12% was his.
It's 12.5%.
12.5. Okay. So the question was, is there any downside to enabling LZ4 for an entire pool? No, not really.
No. We kind of talked about this a bit at AsiaBSDCon. But LZ4 for the entire pool is probably fine.
Yeah. So he says he noticed that PC-BSD 10 doesn't use LZ4 for /user/var or user ports disk files. So the first two are not necessarily true. We create those data sets, but they're set with can mount equals off. So they're not actually used. They're just there as placeholders.
As well? I guess, you want everything in the root.
Yeah, no. We do that with /user and /var, and that way they're all stored in the root for your boot environments.
Right, so that you have the different packages in your root environment so that you can...
Correct.
When you switch boot environment, if you install something and it breaks X, you can switch to another boot environment. You have the different package set, and it doesn't break X.
That is correct. Let me check here. Matter of fact,
then,
we do create a couple. We create var log, var temp, and var audit. Yep. So those are outside of the boot environment.
Yeah, because you want your logs no matter what. And then,
so you want to be able to find your logs.
Disabling it on user ports disk files makes sense. Even though it's going to only try a little bit and give up, you know that every file in disk files is already that tar that
we can safely assume everything there is going to be compressed. That's one directory where it should always have compressed data in it. So we leave it off there. I just committed today a fix, so we just set the entire root pool to LZ4 compression.
Right, and then you can turn it off specifically for, say, disk files if you want. But
for any other pools that you want it specific or data sets you want off specifically, you can set that.
But I guess how long ago did we switch from V28? Like, I guess 9.1 still had V28, but 9.2 was V5000. Yes. Because for a little while anyway, it made sense not to use LZ4 so that the pool could still be imported on an older machine.
Now, this will be for when we do 10.0.2 in the next quarter, so 3 months from now.
Yeah, but
we'll have it on
you're using V5000 anyway, so that didn't actually make sense.
Yep. So he says he loves the show. He can't wait to get his hands on a BSD Now shirt.
Yes, we're still working
to be able to announce something about that down the road. Still working on it.
There's some roadblocks, but I think we got it almost sorted out.
Okay, cool. Well, I hope we answered your question. So last up, we have from Christopher. Hey, nice name, by the way. So, hey, guys, and everyone in podcast land. He has a few questions regarding PFSense, jails, and Beehive. So let's start with number one here. When setting size limits on jails, does that space include null FS mounted directories such as in user ports?
Well, it depends.
I believe so.
So it depends on how you're doing it. Like if you're using EasyJail, and because he mentions null FS mounted directories, so I'm assuming he's using EasyJail. The port tree itself actually gets mounted to user ports read-only, and then the temporary files you create, like your work directories and stuff, and your extracted disk files and stuff, go to like var ports. So in that case, your ports tree doesn't count against the space used by the disk image. And neither does the base system, which gets mounted to /basejail. So only the files that actually get created, like your /etc and anything you add there, and your home directories and user local and all that stuff. It depends how you're doing it. And generally, you're not setting a size limit so much as creating a fixed size disk image. If you're doing it without that and just using ZFS datasets, then you can set quotas and stuff. But in generally, no, the null FS mounted stuff doesn't count, and because those are shared between all jails, you normally want them to count anyway. Because they're not taking up any space for each person that's using them.
Sure.
Yep.
Okay. So question 2, in Beehive, is it possible to run a Linux VM and pass a network interface through to allow for security monitoring with tools such as Snort or BroIDS? If so, what kind of performance hit should be expected, since capturing all packets is important with these types of applications? Now, do you know if Beehive can do that?
It depends what he means by pass through. So Beehive supports hardware pass-through, which would actually take the NIC away from the host machine and put it in the guest. However, you can, if you have a multi-port NIC, I don't think you can do just one of the ports. If it would actually like the whole device. On my 4-port NIC, it's 2 and 2, so I could do 2 and not 2 or something. But so in general, yes, it supports hardware pass-through, and you can pass the NIC in, and then there's almost no performance penalty on the NIC, and there's no performance penalty on CPU in the virtual machine either. So you should be pretty good.
Sure.
Even without that, using the tap interface and the FreeBSD net, you can bridge it and probably get most of the packets, I think. Maybe not quite all. So yeah, your hardware pass-through is probably the best bet. The disadvantage to using hardware pass-through is it disables the memory overcommit features.
Okay.
So you can't... all of the memory used by the Beehive ends up being wired instead of being regular user space memory that can be swapped out. But in that type of installation, you don't want the Bro IDS being swapped out anyway.
Sure.
So yes, it can do that, and the performance hit should be minimal because CPU is like 100% pass through. Doing like things like benchmarks that do like SSH 256 hashes and stuff. You get the same speed in the VM as out of the VM. The memory stuff works pretty good. The disk is the only one that's not going to be 100% performant yet, and that's still being worked on. And the network stuff, it's good enough to do a gigabit without any trouble, but more than a gigabit, it gets a little, it's still being worked on.
Sure.
The CPU utilization from network is a bit higher, but if you're doing hardware pass-through, it wouldn't be, because you're actually putting the device into the virtual machine and using the regular, Intel driver or whatever, rather than doing any virtualization at all. And finally, he says, in P.F.S, is it possible to create an interface that would behave like a span or mirrored port on a switch? P.F.S isn't really meant to act like a switch, so I don't think you can do a mirror port.
Not that I've heard of.
Yeah.
He's afraid to attempt it via the CLI. How would you do that via the CLI?
Yeah, I don't think that's a feature that BSD really has. What might be interesting to you is Luigi's talk at BSDCan about Open vSwitch, which might have that feature. And that would be basically a software switch. Because currently FreeBSD doesn't really have a software switch.
Sure.
So something like that, or Luigi's NetMap stuff, can probably do that. But that's not possible currently. Because remember, your P.F.S isn't a switch, it's a router.
Yes.
You should use a switch to do mirrored ports. Like with my P.F.S, the internet comes in and goes into the switch in a VLAN, and then the other port in that VLAN goes to the P.F.S. So I could just add a third port that would be a mirror and go off to my, traffic sniffer or something if I wanted to do that. If I wanted to sniff everything on the far side of the P.F.S instead of the near side. So you can do that with a regular switch that supports mirroring and a VLAN instead of trying to make the P.F.S do it. Because, I don't think that's possible. But if somebody knows better, they should email us.
Yeah, definitely let us know if you know of an alternate way to do this. But cool. I hope we answered most of your questions this week, guys. As usual, all our tutorials are going to be posted in their entirety at bsdnow.tv. We've also had some updates to the package NG, ZFS, and OpenBSD router and FreeBSD desktop tutorials. So 4 of those guys have gotten some updates and fixes. So if you would like to take a look at those changes, they're all available on the website. Also, if you're using the automatic errata checking script in the router tutorial, you need to re-download the new fixed version. They rearranged some stuff on the website and broke it looks like, but a new fixed version will correct that for you. Also, a few weeks worth of new tutorials were uploaded ahead of time for the benefit of everyone, so no point in us keeping them private here in our documents. We can just go ahead and publish them, so go ahead and check it out. If you find problems with them, let us know ahead of time. We can fix them before the show. And as usual, send your questions, comments, show ideas, topics, or stories you want mentioned on the show to feedback@bsdnow.tv. That's the only place we're really monitoring, so no other comments on YouTube or Reddit or anywhere else. Please send it there if you want us to actually read it. And you can always watch live Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern, 1800 UTC. And also, our winner of our tutorial contest, Disco, sent us a picture with his awesome FreeBSD pillow.
Let me see if I can pull that up.
Pillow.
There we go. There's the winner of our tutorial with his awesome pillow. I have the same one on my couch in my living room.
So awesome. Thank you for sending that over. That's that's
if
neat.
you go back a couple episodes, you can find the link, or I think it's still there on the contest page, to contact the guy that did the pillows if you want to buy your own pillow.
Yeah, so we'll have to. Is he making more of those now, Alan? How many?
Well, if you
still
order them,
handing
he will.
right?
Yeah, so it takes a while because he makes it by hand after you order
Sure.
it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you guys for being with us on this show this week, and look forward to being with you again same time next week. And hope you guys have a good week.
Yes. See you next week.